We call for a Green New Deal, like the New Deal that helped get us out of the Great Depression. We call for similar emergency measures right now. So it's a New Deal, but with a green focus so that it solves two crises at once. Both the crisis of the economy, which has not recovered for the vast majority of Americans. It's still an economic emergency. And at the same time, it will solve the climate emergency. And we call for 20 million good wage jobs beginning at $15 an hour minimum wage. These jobs will focus on greening our energy system, our food system, and public transportation, as well as restoring critical infrastructure, including ecosystems like the Conservation Corps addressed back at the time of the New Deal. So this would achieve 100% wind, water, and sun, clean renewable energy by 2030. That is a massive undertaking. We compare this to the response to the bombing of Pearl Harbor, where it took us 6 months to massively transform the economy from 0 up to 25% of GDP in that war effort because we had a national emergency. And what we point out is that the emergency we're facing now actually makes Pearl Harbor look like small potatoes. We're not talking about one harbor, we're talking about all harbors like this one here, which will essentially be wiped out, including the population centers all over, coasts of North America and around the world, the entire country of Bangladesh. The most recent data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, which at this point they've only described verbally, so it's only been reported by a few press, but they will be rolling out the specific reports on this. But a senior scientist from NOAA was attending a conference of insurance corporations about 2 months ago and described to them the most recent report from the Antarctic, which said essentially that we can expect 9 feet of sea level rise as soon as 2050 if we haven't taken a dramatic change in policy and direction, which we're not doing. The Democrats pride themselves on being slightly less destructive than the Republicans. And in fact, to look at the numbers, we've actually done far worse under a Democratic administration in terms of the escalation of fossil fuel extraction and emissions. We have, tapped into every source of fossil fuels in this country and around the world, thanks in part to Hillary Clinton and her office to promote fracking. So we're not doing, we're not heading in the right direction here by any means. And in fact, the Democrats have not slowed down the crisis by any means. So as NOAA pointed out, we are in very serious risk now of a civilization-ending hit within decades unless we have a profound transformation of policy. So this data, by the way, is not different from what Jim Hansen said about a year and a half ago with his study that basically identified even larger increases in sea level beginning 10 years later. But, it's the same ballpark, but a massive, we're heading for real trouble unless we really do a turnaround quickly. Not to mention that there are somewhere just under 24 nuclear power plants that will all go Fukushima that are located on the coasts at sea level and which will be flooded. So, we are in a state of emergency. We should be in a state of emergency. And if we had an honest conversation about this, we could actually provide the motivation for a real fix, which means massively transforming our industries to clean, renewable energy, as well as the compatible food systems and transportation systems to zero out fossil fuels by 2030, which is in time to avert the full-blown disaster of climate change. And at the same time, it revives the economy. It also turns out we get so much healthier from zeroing out fossil fuels and the related toxic pollutants that we save enough money in reduced health expenditures alone to pay for the green energy transition. And this is well documented in studies coming out of Stanford. This was also demonstrated by real-world experience in the country of Cuba when they lost their oil pipeline in the early 1990s with the fall of the Soviet Union. Suddenly they had to go fossil fuel-free overnight, meaning transportation, energy, and food, and had to convert to an organic food system also overnight. So what happened to their health? You would think their health would take a nosedive because their economy is in shambles. They've lost their trade partner, et cetera. And overnight, their death rate from diabetes went down 50%. Their death rates from heart attacks and strokes went down about 30%. So we spend $3 trillion a year on health care, but it's not a health care system. It's really a sick care system because we are made sick particularly by the pollutants that we and our communities are exposed to, by a sick industrial food system and a passive transportation system. All of that turns around in the Green New Deal, and we have a real infrastructure of health. So instead of spending $3 trillion a year while we're just getting sicker, we can also have a health transformation that will save us money. Cuba spent $0 on health improvements when it had these dramatic improvements in their public health profile.
Why cannot we rely on the free market unhindered to drive these changes? If there's profit to be made in a massive conversion to renewable energy, then we'll have renewable energy. If there's not profit to be made, then we don't. That's the system, at least, we've had throughout the fossil fuel era.
Well, we don't have a free market. We have a very entrenched market, and a system that rewards insiders systematically, and in which those who are most powerful commandeer the forces of our political elite. We have two political parties that are funded by banks, big banks, predatory banks, and by fossil fuel giants, and by war profiteers. So these are the drivers of our policies across the board. And unfortunately, our efforts to free up this market do not work. So it's going to take more than, just, sort of lip service to a level playing field. It's going to take real work to make this happen. And, like during the New Deal or during the war mobilization, we understood that our lives really depend on fixing this crisis. They didn't rely on profits to gear up the war industry after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. We're facing a similar crisis now.